The grand chamber of the Galactic Dominion was alive with amusement. Across the vast room, representatives of 100 different species laughed, their voices echoing off the high metallic walls. The center of their attention was a massive holographic display, glowing with the image of an incoming human fleet, small, weak, and insignificant. That was the common belief. The Dominion, the greatest power in the galaxy, had existed for centuries without challenge. They had fought and crushed countless civilizations. And now, they faced the humans, a young species with laughable technology, limited space travel, and no real experience in large-scale war. The warlords saw no threat, only an opportunity to remind the galaxy why they ruled. High Warlord Zithar, a towering reptilian with dark crimson scales, sat on his throne, his golden war armor gleaming under the artificial lights. He watched as his subordinates chuckled and mocked the incoming human forces. The Dominion had intercepted messages from Earth, desperate pleas for peace, empty attempts to negotiate. It was pathetic. The humans clearly knew their place, on their knees. Zithar leaned forward, his voice a deep guttural growl. "Tell me, what does the mighty human fleet look like?" The Dominion's tactical commander, a four-eyed Selvian, smirked as he brought up another projection. A cluster of small ships appeared, barely enough to qualify as a fleet. Compared to the Dominion's massive war armada, which stretched across entire systems, the human fleet looked like insects about to be crushed beneath a giant's foot. The laughter grew louder. A Vorthian general, his armored exoskeleton clicking as he moved, hissed in amusement. "They'd bring this against us. A handful of rusted ships. This is not a war. It is a joke." The council erupted into cheers, their confidence unshaken. They had seen this before. Rebellions, uprisings, lesser species thinking they could resist the Dominion's rule. It always ended the same way. They would send their mighty fleet, their capital warships, their dreadnoughts, and erase the humans from existence. Their homeworld would burn, their colonies would be divided among the Dominion's allies, and their species would be nothing more than a footnote in galactic history. But despite the overwhelming confidence, a small voice in the back of Zithar's mind whispered a warning. He had read the reports. He had seen the scattered encounters between human vessels and pirate groups. Something had been odd about them. The humans did not fight like the other species. They did not retreat when they should have. They took losses but still pressed forward. And more importantly, their ships never fought fair. Every time someone expected a simple battle, the humans introduced something unpredictable, tactics that no logical species would ever attempt. They fought with an insanity that turned battles into chaos. He had dismissed it before, believing it to be desperation. But now, as he watched the incoming fleet, something about their formation, their lack of fear, unsettled him. Still, he remained silent. His warriors needed confidence, not doubts. He could not allow weakness to spread. So he stood, raising his clawed hand for silence. The room fell quiet as he spoke. "The humans have chosen war," he declared, his voice carrying across the chamber. "And they will learn what happens to those who challenge the Dominion." The warlords roared in approval, slamming their fists against the tables, eager for the battle to come. Across the Dominion, fleets prepared for war, engines burning bright, as they moved into position. The greatest military force in the galaxy was about to unleash its full power upon the foolish humans. It would be over in a matter of hours. Or so they believed. Far beyond the Dominion's borders, the human fleet continued its approach. Inside the bridge of the UNSF Indomitable, Admiral Marcus Steele stood with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable as he observed the incoming data. Around him, his officers worked in disciplined silence, their hands moving across consoles as they monitored every detail. They were outnumbered, outgunned, facing an enemy that had ruled the galaxy for centuries. But no one on the bridge looked afraid, because unlike the Dominion, humanity knew exactly what it was walking into. The Dominion expected a simple war. This would be anything but. The Dominion's war machine moved with terrifying speed. Hundreds of warships, each one a monument to destruction, surged forward, cutting through space like an unstoppable tide. Massive dreadnoughts, bristling with heavy cannons, positioned themselves at the front of the formation, ready to annihilate the approaching human fleet in a single, overwhelming strike. Smaller escort ships moved alongside them, ensuring there would be no escape, no weakness in their advance. From the command deck of the Dominion's flagship, the Warbringer, High Warlord Zithar, watched the battle unfold with the confidence of a predator about to strike. On the surface, this engagement seemed pointless. The humans had arrived with a force that was laughable in comparison. A few dozen ships against thousands. This wasn't a battle. It was an execution. Yet, as the Dominion's weapons locked onto their targets, something unexpected happened. The human fleet did not retreat. They did not broadcast surrender. They did not behave like a doomed force at all. Instead, they moved with an eerie precision, their ships forming into tight, disciplined formations that weaved through space like a single living entity. Zithar narrowed his eyes, his claws gripping the edges of his command chair. There was no panic among the human ships, no erratic movement, no hesitation. They were waiting for something. The Dominion fired first. Gigantic plasma bolts, each one capable of melting through city-sized battleships, tore through the void toward the human fleet. Explosions bloomed across the battlefield as the energy blast struck, only to reveal that they had hit nothing but empty space. The human ships twisted and spun in impossible ways, dodging the Dominion's opening salvo with an efficiency that sent a ripple of unease through Zithar's officers. Impossible, a Dominion strategist muttered, staring at the readings. Their ships are too slow-to. Before he could finish, the counterattack began. The humans did not fight like any species the Dominion had ever encountered. They did not engage in a straightforward assault, did not rely on brute force. Instead, they struck with surgical precision. In an instant, the battlefield became a storm of electronic warfare, jamming signals, and sudden, coordinated attacks. Dominion capital ships, their massive forms built for direct combat, found themselves blinded. Their targeting systems failed, their communications were scrambled, and their formations broke apart as smaller human vessels darted through them like shadows. And then the true horror began. The human fleet did not fire massive weapons in retaliation. They disabled. One by one, Dominion ships lost control. Their engines flickered and died. Their shields collapsed. Their weapons overheated and shut down. Zithar watched in growing alarm as his mighty warships, the pride of the Dominion's navy, were reduced to drifting husks without a single fatal shot being fired. What are they doing? One of his commanders demanded. But Zithar knew. The humans weren't destroying them. They were disassembling them. Piece by piece, system by system, the Dominion's superior fleet was being rendered useless, its vast strength turning into a liability as human ships danced around them like predators circling wounded prey. The warlord's claws dug into his chair, his heart pounding. He had underestimated them. They all had. The humans did not fight to win battles. They fought to end wars before they even began. Panic spread through the Dominion's fleet like a wildfire. The once mighty armada, feared across the galaxy, now found itself trapped in a nightmare where nothing made sense. Their weapons, designed to erase entire planets, refused to fire. Their shields, built to withstand planetary bombardments, flickered and failed. Their engines sputtered, their navigation systems twisted into chaos by an unseen force. It was as if the very fabric of the battlefield had turned against them. And the humans, those so-called weaklings, had barely fired a shot. Across the bridge of the Warbringer, High Warlord Zithar's rage was boiling into something far worse than anger. Fear. He had fought 100 campaigns, had crushed rebellions, had torn through enemy lines with overwhelming force. But this was different. This was not war. This was a dismantling. A lesson. The humans had turned his fleet into a training exercise. Their ships moved with surgical precision, slipping past the Dominion's broken formations like hunters playing with their prey. One by one, entire warships lost power, drifting helplessly in space. And then, for the first time in Dominion history, something unthinkable happened. The humans opened communications. A single transmission cut through the jamming fields, bypassing Dominion encryption like it was nothing. It did not ask for surrender. It did not demand negotiations. It simply played a video, a recording of Dominion warlords laughing at humanity before the battle began. Zithar watched his own face appear on the screen, grinning in arrogant amusement as he dismissed the human fleet as insignificant. Then the screen flickered. The recording was replaced by a simple message in Galactic Standard. "Are you still laughing?" The bridge fell silent. No one spoke. No one moved. The entire Dominion fleet, millions of tons of warships, thousands of crew members, an empire's might, all paralyzed. And then, with chilling finality, the human admiral's voice cut through the silence. "Leave this space," he said, his voice calm, unshaken, "or we finish what we started." It was not a threat. It was a statement, a fact, a choice that was no longer in Zithar's hands. The Dominion had never been given an ultimatum before. They had never been told to leave, to run, to surrender without a single decisive battle. But they had no choice. Zithar felt the weight of it. The humiliation, the bitter realization that the Dominion was not the ultimate power they had always believed themselves to be. And as he watched his once invincible fleet break apart, retreating like wounded beasts, he knew that the galaxy itself had changed. Humanity was not weak. They had never been weak. They had simply waited for the moment when the galaxy would challenge them. And now, the Dominion had paid the price. The retreat was the hardest decision High Warlord Zithar had ever made, but it was also the only option left. His fleet, once the symbol of absolute Dominion power, was now little more than a collection of crippled warships, floating helplessly in the cold void. The humans had dismantled them with terrifying efficiency, not by brute force, not by overwhelming numbers, but by something far worse: absolute control. They had turned the battlefield into their domain, manipulating the very rules of engagement until the Dominion's superior firepower meant nothing. And now, as the once mighty armada limped away, broken and humiliated, Zithar sat in silence on the bridge of the Warbringer, his claws gripping the armrests of his throne so tightly they threatened to snap. Around him, his officers were eerily quiet, their usual arrogance and bravado crushed beneath the weight of their failure. The humans had given them a choice: retreat or be erased. That choice had never been given to any enemy of the Dominion before. The warlords never negotiated, never backed down, never surrendered. And yet, here they were, fleeing like prey before an apex predator that had not even bothered to land a killing blow. That was the part that unnerved Zithar the most. The humans could have destroyed them. They had every advantage, every opportunity. They had shut down weapons, disabled shields, severed communications, turned warships into drifting wrecks. And yet, they had let them go. This was not mercy. Mercy would have been an offer of surrender. Mercy would have been a treaty, a demand, an ultimatum that came with negotiations and compromise. But the humans had not negotiated. They had simply displayed absolute dominance, and then told the Dominion to leave, as if they weren't worth the effort. As if they were insects, unworthy of extermination. The humiliation burned worse than any battlefield wound. The Dominion's strength was unquestioned, their empire spanning across entire sectors, their war fleets feared by all. But in a single encounter, humanity had stripped them of that fear. The message was clear. The Dominion was no longer the most dangerous force in the galaxy. That title belonged to humanity now. Zithar exhaled slowly, his mind racing. If the humans were willing to dismantle an entire war fleet and let them flee, then what did that mean for the future? Had they only seen a fraction of humanity's power? Were the humans holding back? The thought sent a cold chill through him. They had underestimated humanity once, and the price had been absolute humiliation. They would not make that mistake again. But as Zithar watched the human fleet remain motionless, watching them retreat, an even darker thought took root in his mind. What if this was just a warning? What if, the next time they met, humanity wouldn't let them leave at all? The journey back to Dominion-controlled space was suffocating. Every moment of retreat felt like another wound being carved into High Warlord Zithar's pride. The silence on the Warbringer's bridge was heavier than the vacuum outside. The officers too ashamed to speak, too broken to even look at one another. They had never lost like this before, not in battle, not without blood, not without at least making the enemy pay in kind. But the humans had robbed them of that. There had been no grand conflict, no test of might, no desperate, glorious struggle to the last warship. The Dominion fleet had simply been shut down, neutralized, and dismissed like an afterthought. It was the most devastating kind of defeat, one that proved the enemy had been in control the entire time. And the worst part, the humans had never seen them as a real threat. That was what truly unsettled Zithar. In every previous war, the Dominion had crushed their enemies with overwhelming force. Their war machine was relentless, merciless, an empire built on absolute strength. And yet, for the first time, they had been treated like nothing. The humans had simply let them leave, not because they couldn't destroy them, but because they didn't need to. That was the realization that gnawed at Zithar's mind as he sat in the dark chambers of his command quarters, staring at the battle reports that made no sense. How had the humans done it? How had they shut down an entire fleet without firing a single superweapon, without deploying some godlike technology beyond comprehension? They had used jamming signals, cyber warfare, electronic disruptions, but that should not have been enough. The Dominion systems were some of the most advanced in the galaxy, impervious to most conventional hacking, built with redundancies to prevent total system failure. And yet, in a matter of minutes, humanity had rendered them useless. The way they moved, the way they fought, it was unnatural. It was beyond efficiency, beyond discipline. It was as if the entire human fleet was one singular entity, not a collection of ships, but a single conscious being that reacted to everything before it even happened. They had predicted Dominion movements, intercepted commands before they were given, shut down weapons before they could be fired. That should have been impossible. But it had happened. Zithar clenched his jaw, his claws tapping against the cold metal of his desk. Humanity was not just another empire. They were something else entirely. Something dangerous in a way the Dominion had never seen before. They didn't just win battles, they erased the very concept of battle itself. And that was why Zithar knew, with chilling certainty, that this was not the end. The Dominion did not accept humiliation. They would come back. They would prepare. They would adapt. They would learn from their mistakes and bring the full might of their empire down on humanity in a war that would consume entire star systems. That was the only way to reclaim their honor. But deep inside, a small voice whispered the one question that Zithar refused to acknowledge. What if humanity was already expecting that? What if everything, the battle, the retreat, the entire encounter, had been planned from the beginning? What if humanity wasn't just waiting for the next war, but preparing to end it before it even started? The Dominion did not take humiliation lightly. It was not just a wound to their pride. It was a threat to their very existence. Their empire thrived on absolute dominance, the unwavering belief that they were the apex species of the galaxy, that none could stand against them. But now, that belief had been shattered by humans, a species they had once mocked, dismissed, and underestimated. High Warlord Zithar knew what had to be done. The ruling council would demand retaliation, and he would be the one to lead it. They would rebuild, analyze every mistake, fortify their weaknesses, and return with a force unlike anything the humans had ever seen. No more underestimating them. No more treating them as lesser beings. This time, The Dominion would unleash everything. A second campaign was already forming in his mind. Stronger warships, adaptive AI, redundancies to counter electronic warfare, countermeasures against the humans' ability to predict and manipulate the battlefield. Every possible flaw exposed in their humiliating defeat would be corrected. And yet, beneath all his preparations, a gnawing unease refused to fade. What if it wouldn't be enough? The humans had not merely won. They had controlled the battle. They had let the Dominion retreat, as if they already knew how this would end. That was what disturbed Zithar the most. The way the humans fought, the way they moved, as if they had seen this war play out before. There was no desperation, no struggle, no hesitation. It was as if they had already run every possible outcome, calculated every countermeasure, and dismantled the Dominion before the war had even begun. That was not just strategy. That was something beyond war. It was inevitability. And the more Zithar thought about it, the more the cold realization settled into his bones. The humans had shown them a fraction of their power. They had only given the Dominion enough of a fight to make them retreat, enough of a loss to humiliate them, but not enough to destroy them. Not yet. The thought sent a chill through him. Had they misread the humans entirely? Was their dominance built on something deeper than mere technology or tactics? What if humanity had been waiting for this moment? What if, for the first time in galactic history, the Dominion had finally encountered a species that had not just prepared for war, but had been designed for it? Zithar exhaled slowly, staring at the tactical map of the galaxy. A second war was inevitable. The Dominion had never backed down from a challenge, and they wouldn't start now. But as he watched the sectors of human-controlled space glow, like embers in the dark void, he couldn't shake the feeling that the humans were watching too, waiting for the Dominion to make their next move. And for the first time in his long career, Zithar was no longer certain who would be the hunter and who would be the prey. The Dominion's retaliation was swift and merciless. Fleets were rebuilt, strategies refined, and entire war doctrines rewritten with one purpose: to counter humanity. High Warlord Zithar stood at the heart of it all, overseeing every plan, every simulation, every weapon designed to erase the shame of their first defeat. The ruling council had given him absolute authority, and the message was clear: return with victory, or do not return at all. He had spent cycles ensuring that no weakness remained. Dominion warships were now equipped with decentralized command structures, making it impossible for humans to disable entire fleets through cyber warfare. Predictive AI was implemented to counter human tactics, calculating thousands of possible maneuvers in real time. Shields were reconfigured, weapon systems hardened against interference, and fleets were no longer reliant on conventional communication. Everything had been prepared. This time, the Dominion would not be caught off guard. And yet, as the Armada left Dominion space and surged toward human territory, Zithar felt something was wrong. It was a feeling he had never known before, a silent warning deep within his instincts, a whisper that told him he was walking into something far worse than their first defeat. The humans had let them retreat. Why? If they had been truly ruthless, they could have ended the war before it started. But they hadn't. They had shown restraint, as if they had already known this day would come. That thought haunted Zithar as his fleet approached the edge of human-controlled space, an overwhelming force of warships large enough to reduce entire planets to rubble. They had come to erase humanity's arrogance, to remind them that the Dominion was the true ruler of the galaxy. But as they entered the system where the first battle had taken place, they found nothing. No defenses, no outposts, no fleets waiting to intercept them. The system was empty, abandoned, silent. Zithar's instincts screamed at him. This was a trap. He ordered the fleet to hold position, scanning for any hidden forces, any sign of human presence. There was nothing. And then, just as he began to doubt his own paranoia, a single message appeared on his warship's display. No encryption, no hidden codes, no threats. Just two simple words: "You're late." Before Zithar could react, The space around them came alive. Entire sections of the void twisted and shimmered as human warships decloaked. Not hundreds, not thousands, but an impossible number. They had been waiting. They had known. The Dominion had spent cycles preparing for a war, building weapons to counter a human fleet. But the real human fleet had never even fought them yet. What they had encountered before had been nothing more than a fraction of humanity's power. And now, as Zithar watched in horror, he understood the terrible truth. The first battle had never been a battle at all. It had been a test, and the Dominion had already failed. The realization struck High Warlord Zithar like a blade to the chest. The first battle, the humiliating defeat that had sent the Dominion scrambling to rebuild, had never been a real fight. It had been a lesson, a message. Humanity had let them live, let them retreat, let them believe they had a chance, all while watching, studying, analyzing every adaptation they made. The Dominion had spent entire cycles preparing for a second war, building defenses, rewriting strategies, but they had been preparing for the wrong enemy. The humans that now surrounded them were not the same fleet they had faced before. This was the real war fleet. Massive warships, sleek and silent, formed an unbreakable wall of metal and firepower, their designs unlike anything the Dominion had ever seen. They did not move in the clumsy, calculated formations of lesser species. They moved as one entity, one vast and intelligent force, perfectly synchronized. Zithar had seen many fleets in his time, had commanded the mightiest armadas the Dominion had ever known, but never had he seen a fleet that felt alive. And it was at that moment, staring into the cold, merciless expanse of human warships, that he understood. They had never stood a chance. The Dominion had always believed war was a matter of strength, of numbers, of firepower. But the humans had taken war to a level beyond mere combat. They didn't just fight battles, they ended them before they began. They had let the Dominion come back, let them bring their most powerful fleet, let them believe they had learned from their mistakes. And now, they were about to teach them the final lesson. A transmission flickered onto Zithar's display. The same simple, emotionless voice that had sent the first message. This is not your war anymore. And then, all at once, the void ignited. Human warships moved with terrifying precision, weaving between Dominion vessels like hunters among prey. There was no struggle, no clash of fleets, only annihilation. Dominion warships were torn apart before they could fire, entire squadrons wiped from existence, in coordinated strikes so precise, so effortless, that it was clear the humans had planned this down to the last second. The countermeasures, the strategies, the redundancies that Zithar had so carefully built into this armada, none of them mattered. The humans had already calculated them, countered them, rendered them obsolete before the first shot was ever fired. This was not war. This was a purge, and for the first time in his long and blood-stained career, Zithar knew fear. True, suffocating, inescapable fear. The Dominion had ruled the galaxy through strength, through absolute, unyielding power. But against humanity, strength meant nothing. They had never needed to fight the Dominion before. They had never needed to bring their true forces to bear. But now, Zithar had given them a reason. And as his warship systems began to fail, as his once mighty fleet was reduced to burning wreckage, a final thought echoed through his mind. The Dominion had always believed themselves to be the apex predators of the galaxy, but they had never stopped to wonder, what happens when the true apex predator finally reveals itself?